I'm Brandis Strotman with Costa Mesa Brief, and today we are meeting with Jason Komala. Thank you for meeting with us.
Thank you for having me this morning, Brandis.
Let's start off with what district are you running for and who are you running against?
No problem. I'm running in District 1. I'm running against Don and John. And I think the biggest difference between the candidates, obviously, party affiliation. So I know that it's a nonpartisan election. However, if you look at the candidates, it's pretty clear where the party lines are. And for me, one of the reasons it was important for me to run independently was I wanted to make sure that my commitment and my obligation was to the citizens and the community of Costa Mesa, because I wanted to make sure that I always did what was in our best interest for our city without being connected to a larger political agenda. Which is actually one of the reasons that my campaign doesn't have a donation button, because I want to make sure that all of my commitments are to the city. I've turned down donations, I've turned down support from political action committees already in the short time, because I wanted to make sure that there was no lapse in integrity, no lapse in judgment, and no question to my integrity, to the commitment to the citizens of Costa Mesa.
So why don't you tell us what is some of your experiences you could bring to the table?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the candidates bring a diverse amount of experience that could be helpful. But I think what the City Council needs now is someone who can bring that bipartisanship together, right? If you look at the City Council meetings over the last 10, 15 years, it's almost like a Netflix series. You know, it's definitely something I would want to binge watch. It's exciting, it's interesting, but at the same time, it's not healthy for a collaborative environment. My background is in organizational change leadership. The organizations I've worked for the last 22 years have always brought me on because there's a cultural shift in the organization. Whether they're changing leadership or a process, they want me to dislodge an ingrained way of doing things and be able to adapt. And I think that's a critical part. And when I look at the 5 dysfunctions of a team that I always analyze a team about, the base is trust. And I think before we can move on and create that bipartisanship, we have to have a level of trust between all the council members, between the citizens of Costa Mesa, and that trust requires transparency. I always love a quote. It says, "A coach cares so much about your results, they're willing to risk the relationship that makes it to make you better." And really what that means is having the courage to have the integrity to do the right thing and say the right thing, but knowing that we're all in alignment for the same thing. And what I want to do is keep the main thing for our city. And that main thing isn't what's the next political move or what party are you affiliated with. The main thing is, how do we protect our community here in Costa Mesa? How do we do what's best? How do we support our citizens and our business owners?
So you're a newcomer to our local politics. Most people we interview have been in this for a while, so why don't you tell us a bit about yourself more?
Absolutely. So I've spent the last 22 years working for companies in telecommunications, the fitness industry, and even retail. In that time, like I said, I've worked in organizational change, done everything from diversity and inclusion training to more recently a lot of safety training with everything that's been going on. And my background is really aligned the same way in my education as well. I have my bachelor's in management and I have my MBA from Cal State Fullerton in organizational leadership.
What issues are unique to your district? You're going to be representing a certain section of Costa Mesa and then of course Costa Mesa as a whole. So what in your little section, District 1, is a unique issue?
I think in District 1, and really even in all of Costa Mesa, there's a lot of micro issues, but they all fall under the umbrella of public safety and the financial health of the city. I think a lot of, especially District 1 residents, look at the financial spending of the city and our $30 million deficit coming up here that they're worried about it. How are we spending our money? And when I look at a lot of projects, I think, how do we make this more efficient? How could have this money been better spent? As a fiscal conservative, I always do that. Even in my own home, I always think, well, there's still a little bit of ketchup left in this bottle, right? And that's just really how my mind works. I always want to make sure that we maximize our resources.
Now you mentioned crime in District 1, but crime has been declining steadily since around 2015. So what is the city doing right on that?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, and it's a data-related question, and I love data. And so crime has gone down since 2015, overall crime. But what I want you to remember is 2014 and 2015 saw a huge spike in peak in crime. And so a decline from that peak is a decline, but it's not what we think it is. And so when I look at the crime data between 2020 up to July, we don't have August data yet, through July of 2020 versus 2015, property crimes have definitely gone down. When we look at burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson, they've gone down, which makes sense. People have been quarantined. It's hard to commit property crimes when the entire family is home. However, when you look at violent crimes, rape, robbery, assault, those have gone up against our 2015 peak numbers. And I think we've done a great job as a community to try to staff up law enforcement again, but we're still not at our budgeted number. And I think we need to continue that work, and we need to create a collaborative culture with our law enforcement to build a law enforcement that attracts the best talent. Because we have officers that are retiring. As I talk to law enforcement, there's a lot of them that are planning to retire soon, and how do we staff up those openings?
So how do you plan on hiring more police and firefighters and still addressing the pension crisis that's been ongoing?
Absolutely. So first, I'd love to address the pension crisis. First off, I think the pensions are commitments to the law enforcement families and fire and city staff, and I think that's very important. I'm a person who believes that you have to fulfill your obligations, and I want to do that to the best of our ability. And so I think of my own mom. She's 81. My father worked for the government for 20 years, and when he passed last year, she still received a little part of his pension, which was called a survivor benefit. Now, when I think of families in that situation, I can't in good conscience take away resources or finances, especially now from families that depend on that. However, looking towards the future, we look at programs like PEPRA that have started to make adjustments for everyone hired after 2013. I want to continue with that work and do what's smart for the future of our company. I'm not a short-term, quick fix person. I look at the long-term picture, because when I think of Costa Mesa for the future of my son who's born in the next 4 weeks, I think where's it going to be in the next 4, 8, 20 years, and that's really what I'm looking forward towards.
What budget cuts can you make then?
Well, I think as we take a look at it, for instance, I think homelessness is a big issue for the city, right? And I think last year we opened up the bridge shelter, partnered with Mercy House, and we definitely needed to do that so we could clear out the Santa Ana riverbed. But then the next step that the council voted on was the permanent shelter that we're going to open on, I believe, on Airway. So as much as I support that, and I think it's a human issue, I also think we could have done a better job than spending $7 million to purchase the warehouse and $3.5 million to now revamp it to get it to be a homeless shelter. So it's going to have about 70 beds. So doing the math, that's about $153,000 a bed. That's a pretty pricey bed. And I think if we reassess projects like that, we can find ways where we can maximize our budget, which will allow us to have more financial resources as a city, which is crucial. But at the same time, will allow us to help more people.
Now, on the homeless issue, what do you think the city can do differently? Because the numbers, the city goes out every year and does a homeless count, and the numbers are not really changing year to year. So this has been an ongoing issue. What can the city do differently? What can you bring to them?
I think homelessness obviously is a national crisis, right? And I think when you think of homelessness and what are the elements that impact that, there's a lot of them. I think a point I touched on earlier was sober living homes, right? A lot of these sober living homes, they advertise with the names that show, hey, we're a home that's in paradise, and which draws them to areas like Costa Mesa and Newport Beach. And so what happens is when the insurance runs out for these patients, they get put out on the street, and then they get into the cycle of homelessness. Now, the weird loophole about the system of sober living homes is if that patient relapses, the insurance kicks back in. So it's almost conducive for the person to relapse again. So I think that's part of the issue. The other part of it is we have to remember it's a humanity problem. These homeless, there are faces to these homeless people, right? There's names to these to the homeless, and so I think we need to attack policy with a level of humanity as well. Because what we need to remember is a good percentage of our homeless are veteran, a good percentage of our homeless have mental illness, and how do we address that instead of pushing the problem off? I think a lot of people, when they see homeless, it's something they drive by. Right? In my experience working for different organizations, I've seen what happens when you call law enforcement. If by some chance they end up in the penal system, they still don't get the support that they need to get better. So it's this vicious cycle. So we have to look at ways that we can break the cycle and help the most people we can.
Now, you mentioned the sober living homes. So the city has already been in and out of courts for years on that issue, and we're not the only city. Newport Beach has as well. What more do you think you can do?
So I actually reached out to Lauren, who is the vice chair for the Orange County Health Alcohol Drug Advisory Board. And so when I spoke to her, I think we came up with a couple solutions to that. Number one is zoning. Number two is supervision, and number three is support. I think zoning is an important part. City of Costa Mesa issued an ordinance saying sober living homes couldn't open within 650 feet of each other. I don't know if you take a look down your street, 650 feet isn't too far. And I look at my own street and I think, well, a couple could probably open here. And I don't know anybody who wants that. Right? Between the nuisance and the potential crime, when they relapse, we don't want that. But how do we continue to help people? So I think if we zone, and if we supervise and if we issue the support that they need for the systems, I think that'll help and go a long way. We already have state certifications for the good actors that are doing things the right way, who want to help people. However, when we think of the bad actors, the ones that are exploiting patients, that's the group that we want to push out of the city, right? That's the group that's not doing it the right way. That's the group that's not trying to get certifications. We even have state and county-run programs that are very highly regulated. And in addition to that, we could use, I think it's called the OCB Well Project that's opening in Orange. We could use that as a model, because most people that seek treatment, especially Costa Mesa residents who may fall into that, who seek treatment, a lot of them don't need housing. What they need is treatment. What they need is services. And I think if we can create a program that supports both and asks really what they need to fix the problem, that'll make it a lot better.
So let's discuss the pandemic. Do you agree with the city's response on it so far?
So I think I think you're alluding to a mask mandate, if I'm getting to that, because that's been the biggest topic with the pandemic, right? Between the protests here and people getting arrested, I think at Mother's Market, it's been a hot button topic. And for me, let me just be clear. I wear a mask to work every day. I believe masks work. And I don't do it to protect myself. I do it to protect my team. I do it to protect my pregnant wife. I do it out of respect for people that I may run into. And that's really why I do it. And I think that's what, that goodwill is really what keeps people safe, right? And a little bit of common sense. I think when you issue a $100 fine that we don't enforce, it communicates the lack of accountability there. It stresses law enforcement, right? Because who's going to enforce that? And in addition to that, I think it panders a little bit more to generating votes as opposed to keeping people safe. And so I think that's where I disagree with the policy. I don't agree with the $100 fine, because I just think it motivates people the wrong way. I always say there's two ways to motivate people. There's the carrot and the stick. So the carrot motivates, educates, creates a positive environment, right, and nurtures you. Then there's the stick, where if I don't have to describe it, the stick scares you. And nobody likes to be motivated by the stick. And that $100 fine is the stick. And I believe in the citizens of Costa Mesa. I believe in that most people have common sense, not everyone, enough to keep us safe and wear masks.
What about expanding tables and whatnot onto the sidewalks and the parking lots?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great move. Now that we've come off the watch list and we're starting to open up businesses, I think that's what we need to do. Supporting small businesses is a critical part of the future success of our economy. I think when we look at small businesses, sometimes we think, well, I could get by without a haircut. I could get by without going to the restaurant. But what we don't think of is, how do the employees of that restaurant, how do they survive without our business? And so when you look at a situation, when you look at a case, it's important to look at it from all sides to identify how it impacts all parties. And I think businesses can do it safely. For years, there's always been signs that say, no shirt, no shoes, no service. We don't have to have law enforcement enforce that. It's common sense, and a business owner would definitely shoo somebody out if they came out without shoes and without a shirt. And I think we can trust our business owners to do what's safe and what's best for the community, because as a business owner, nobody wants to be the restaurant that gets people sick. It's bad press. We're in an online environment. That news gets out right away. And so we need to trust our business owners to do what's right for our economy and for our community. Do
you think the city could have done anything more to address the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think going back to supporting small business, I think that's definitely something they could do. When I talked to a couple of restaurants, that attempted to put a table outside, the first thing that happened was city enforcement came in and said, hey, you can't have a table. You need to go to the city and file a proposal. So they go to do that, and it cost them $250 of money that they already didn't have. And then they said, well, now you got to go to fire and get approval for, I think it was $270. So instead of finding ways to use that stick once again, right, how do we find ways to partner with our local business owners and give them the tools they need? One of the things that I thought we could do was, rather than a fine, we could have, or enforcement, we could have said, how do we support them, give them the education, maybe support them with PPE, to personal protective equipment to help them open up their businesses safely.
Didn't the county offer a program for these restaurants that, as long as they followed these procedures, it gave them money to put into place to get the PPE and to get the permits?
They did. I think it was OC Dine had a grant program for $1,000. The difficult part is connecting these business owners to those resources. There wasn't really a central place to get that information. Some business owners didn't know it existed, and so I think as a community leader, it's critical for you to connect this business owners to the resources that will help them open.
You want to bring tourism to Costa Mesa?
I think just encouraging just industry within Costa Mesa. When I look at South Coast Plaza, right, I think that's something that we've relied on heavily as far as income. However, when we look at other aspects of Costa Mesa to bring people in, we have Segerstrom, but then when we bring people in, we don't have the hotels, we don't have the entertainment to necessarily support a huge tourism industry. And for us, that's a great way to bring outside dollars into Costa Mesa. And I think we can continue to support the restaurants and the hotels that we have, and we can do a better job with some of the accommodations that, we'll say, are on Harbor Boulevard.
So what can we do to attract the tourists, though? What, outside of Segerstrom and South Coast Plaza, what will bring tourists here?
Well, I think right now it's a very difficult time. You know, myself, I love to travel with my wife, but we've put that on lockdown. So I think we have to look at a plan for 4 or 5 years from now. What things can we have? How can we leverage events like the OC Fair that will bring outside dollars into Costa Mesa? So that's going to require collaboration from the citizens. It's going to require collaboration with different groups and city leaders. But there's not a magic bullet. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. I think it's going to be a lot of things that bring people in.
Now, you mentioned revamping the Harbor Boulevard motels and stuff. What do you mean revamping? Because isn't that just more development?
It is. I think when you look at the motels on Harbor Boulevard, I think most people would agree that it's not ideal for a community environment, right? It brings a different element. I think when we go back to sober living, a lot of people that get out of the program, they'll transition through those motel homes. And so I think what we need to do is take a look at those motels and see how we can partner with them to clean up the element there. And we'll really start off with that. Motels
has actually been an ongoing fight in Costa Mesa. Yeah. So what makes you think you could do something differently for, say, Motel 6, since that's a franchise?
So I think as we look at motels, they're looking at their business differently right now as well. Travel being down, I think we need to take a look at Motel 6. We need to partner with ownership. We need to look at the land, and we need to basically see what that land could be best used for. And I think looking at their financial situation as well, a lot of these hotels and motels, they're struggling as well, and they may be looking to get out. And so as we partner with the city and we can potentially make them offers to repurpose that land, that might be something that they're interested in.
So let's look at the Vagabond Inn, as that would be a small business. That's not the franchise that Motel 6 is. So wouldn't they need the same support as a small business instead of just a way out of their business?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of businesses that I've worked with, they look at two things. Obviously everyone wants to grow their business, but some people get to a tipping point in their business where they need to exit. And I think that's where we need to partner with those owners and say, what is best for the community and what is best for you as a business owner?
Now, one of the things on overdevelopment is we've been told as citizens of both California and Orange County and Costa Mesa that our housing issues, the reason they're so expensive or the reason we don't have enough parking, is we don't have enough housing. And how can we get more housing without overdeveloping?
So I love that question. I actually spoke to John Zick. So there was a project up on Sunflower, 1 Metro West, and John was the dissenting vote. And I always like to hear all sides of the story. And he brought up a great point, really. We talk about it as a housing crisis, right? But really, if you look, there's apartments available, there's homes available. It's really not a housing issue, it's an affordability issue. Now, there's really 2 ways to address a affordability issue. One, give everybody more money, which sounds great, but not realistic, or make your community so undesirable that nobody wants to live there. Nobody wants to do that as well. So how do we address that issue? Well, we have to be realistic about it. We have to realize that, a lot of people want to live in Costa Mesa, but not everyone can live in Costa Mesa, right? And so we have to partner with local cities. We need to have resources to help people find this housing that maybe is affordable to them.
Now, you're saying move to a city that's more affordable to them. Mm-hmm. So say somebody's grown up in Costa Mesa, mm-hmm. their support system is here. Their parents watch their kids so they could go to work. Their job is in Costa Mesa. Why should they move to Corona and leave their free babysitting in their job? Sure.
Well, it sounds like if they do have those resources, that's a huge financial burden lifted off of that family. And I think in that case, they have to assess, is this the right time to move? Should they buy? I think when it comes to affordable housing, I definitely think that it's something that we can help people with, but when you look at high density residential like 1 Metro West, I don't think it's smart. When you look at that corridor up Harbor, if you've ever gone up that way, and most of us has, between the traffic coming on and off the 405, people in line for Raising Cane's, people trying to go to In-N-Out, it's already a very busy area. So I think we need to be smarter. We need to uphold Measure Y, which the citizens of Costa Mesa said, hey, we want to have input. Costa Mesa citizens said, we want to have input on this development. We need to uphold that, and we need to continue with that to ensure that any buildings that we create are in alignment with the needs and the wishes of the city of Costa Mesa.
Well, how do you feel about protesting outside of elected officials' homes?
So, I believe we have the freedom to protest. Do I agree with it? Would I do it? No, I don't. Do we have the right to? We can. And I think as public officials, you expose yourself to a lot, right? Especially when you go online, I see all the things that people expose themselves to, and it's not an easy job. But I think it's also something that it's a job that you sign up for. Now, the tough part is it a job your family signs up for? And that's definitely not the case. I asked my wife, I said, how would you feel? And she said, well, the good thing with that is that, I would feel that I'd make the right decisions and have the transparency where people wouldn't be that upset. But at the same time, you just never know. So I think it's a risk that we take as public officials.
So you support the people protesting currently?
So I support freedom of speech. I don't support becoming a nuisance in someone's neighborhood and to someone's home. Because as much as I don't mind putting myself out there, if someone's bothering my wife while she's trying to sleep, or if we finally put our baby to sleep, I've heard that's challenging, right? I don't know, first baby. I'd be upset, right? And so, but again, that's the risk that I take. I have soundproof windows in front of my house, so hopefully that'll help too.
How can the city council attract new businesses? I know with the pandemic, there are going to be people going out of business. I mean, people have already gone out of business, but we don't yet know the full impact because we're still in the middle of it. Yep. So what can the city do to attract new businesses when this is all over?
Absolutely. So when I look at the last economic recession of 2008, large businesses usually bounce back in about 4 years. Smaller businesses took a little longer, about 6 years. And when I looked at what the opportunities were with small business, it's access to liquidity, right? Cash, basically. And so when you look at small businesses and driving businesses to Costa Mesa, the very first thing we have to do, we have to take care of Costa Mesa businesses. We have to support them. And when I look at what small businesses would need, number one is access to financing, maybe any stimulus funds, and we need to partner with them to get them access to that. The second thing is just support to help them adapt to this new normal, right? Most people have said, this isn't going away, right? Until we have a vaccine. So how do we support them, keep our community safe, and support the small businesses? And really, the third thing is to help them grow. I think as we create a culture that's pro-business in Costa Mesa, more businesses are going to be attracted to Costa Mesa and want to set up shop here.
You have said there's a need for multi-purpose trails. So what is a multi-purpose trail?
Okay.
And what is the need?
So when I think about like biking and walkability, like we're talking about a little bit earlier, is I don't know if you've ever ridden your bike to around town or through work, and there's sections of town that are great. You go up there by Harbor, by the golf course. It's a beautiful, beautiful bike path, right? You can walk it, you can bike it. It's great. However, when it ends, it ends, right? Then what happens? Sometimes I cross through District 1, cross the 405 on a bike. If you ever try to cross the 405, it's...
I have on a bike.
It's a gamble. It's a little bit of a gamble. So it's between managing your pedaling and then looking over your shoulder and make sure you don't get hit by cars. And I think we could do a better job doing that.
And so where are these needed outside of just crossing the 405? Because yeah, that really does need to change. I have ridden a bike more actually up on Baker 73, 55. So what can the trail do, and where else do we need it?
So I think it's one of those where it takes collaboration. We have to work with the Bike and Walkability Committee. We need to work with traffic to create patterns based on getting citizens to where they need to go, whether it's work, whether it's retail shops that are safe. I know I grew up, I rode my bike everywhere, and I want the same for my son.
Why should the people of Costa Mesa vote for you?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest reason why people should vote for me is my background. Spent 22 years working for organizations leading change. And I think when we look at the infighting in the city of Costa Mesa over the last few years, I think a lot of people are tired of that. I'm really the candidate for people who want solutions and are tired of politics, right? And that's really what I come here for. I've talked to some candidates and they have other aspirations, which is great. But my focus is the city of Costa Mesa. My focus is how do we protect our community here, and that's really that independent spirit, that alignment with the city, that freedom from attaching myself to a political party and a larger agenda. That's really what the citizens should vote for. And really, I want to be transparent with every citizen. I want to be accessible to every citizen. I know some existing council members, they say they receive hundreds of emails a week. I want to be there, and I want to be able to answer as many as possible.